Welcome back, everybody. I'm Tank, and this is another edition of my new series, Interview with a Roadie. And today, for the first time in this series, I got to have an interview with another roadie. So today I'm sitting down with the owner and CEO of Solver Productions in Switzerland, Mr. Patrick Häberli. And I got to talk to him about his experiences owning a production company, going on the road as a tour manager for bands like Eluveitie, Heilung, and a bunch of others. And we actually talked about how we both became roadies. So sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation between two roadies that are on the other side of the ocean from each other. Technology. Let's go. Today, I am joined by Patrick Häberli. Welcome, dude. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm great, man. It's a nice, beautiful day. It's finally fall here. So, for those of you that are not familiar, this is the first time another production and touring crew member has joined me for an interview on this channel. So, real quick, you want to give everybody a background on what you've been working on lately or what you do overseas where you're
Yeah,
at?
absolutely. So we have a little company called Solver Productions, and with it, we basically do three things. So the first one is we do tour productions. We have two main clients that we produce all their worldwide tours for. One of them is Heilung, hailing from Denmark, Netherlands. You did a beautiful reaction video to that.
Thank
And
you.
then the other one is Eluveitie, Swiss-based band, of course, like we are also based in Switzerland. Second thing we do is we produce shows locally. So if there are a couple Swiss promoters, think like the Swiss Life Nations, that will hire us to produce their shows. And the third thing we do is we kind of work as a service provider for a lot of other bands. So our main expertise, or like my main nerd world, is all everything that's like flights and logistics and stuff. And just because we've been doing that so long, and we love to do super complex stuff, we book a lot of the flights and logistics for a lot of bands who will hire us to do just that. We work with some great partners and bands there. So basically, that's what we're doing. Company of 5 employees here in Switzerland, and love to be around.
And you own the company, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I started freelance, of course. I started, I guess, like almost everybody in our business. Like my first ever tour was in, like proper tour was in 2012, and that was with just some friends. They were like, "Hey, we're going on tour. You want to come?" I'm like, "Sure." I was like in a very beat up old French van that barely made it up any hill. So, and we just slept on people's floors and basements and rehearsals. But I mean, we've all been there, right?
Oh
So
yeah, dude.
that's how. So that's how it started, and from there I just kind of, yeah, let's give it a shot. And I did light engineering for a while, or like while I was on tour, I started being interested in lights, started to invest and try to learn a lot about light engineering. And then I was a light engineer for a while, and then on tour I just got in more and more different roles as well. I did merch for a while for some tours as well, but then I just noticed that like my real strength and what I want to do is the whole production and tour management thing, in the sense of making stuff happen. um, I think I'm pretty good at organizing stuff and making sure stuff happens. So, more and more I just fell into place for me as well, what I want to do, or what I love doing the most. And now I'm in the very comfortable position of loving with bands and people that I love. Now all we need is a market, and all we need is being able to actually do our jobs. But,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Dude, it's crazy. We actually have like a similar story as far as getting on the road. I didn't know that. I get that asked all the time. People are like, "How did you become a roadie? Like, is it something you went to school for or something you wanted to do?" And I was like, "No, it's completely by accident."
School of life.
Yeah, like I was in a band, and a band that we were on tour with one day. We were playing clubs, and they didn't have a lighting director, and they had one show that the house guy did a not so good job, and their tour manager was just like, I wish somebody on this tour knew how to run lights. And I was just like, I mean, I work at a venue back home and I know how to work around a console. And they're like, can we pay you to run our lights during our show? And I was like, sure. So then they started taking my band out on tour in exchange for me running their lights. And then it turned into, when I was ready to quit my band, they were just like, hey, you want to come do lights, but we also need a merch guy. So lighting and merch for a while.
Right. Yeah, that's really a super similar origin story, because on that first ever tour, the band was opening. They were added last minute because label like insisted on them being added. Nobody really wanted them there as far as like the local promoters go. They were like, ugh, why another opening band? And like I literally for the first couple gigs, I just saw like the tech guys just walking away, or, you know, the band would go on stage, the light guy would do like a setting and then walk away and drink beer. And then it was like, hey, come on, like this can't be it. And this is how I just tried and started, just, you know, mashing buttons.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really interesting. It's different origin story, like almost the same origin story.
Yeah.
And cool.
It's interesting too, because like from there, everything I learned how to do was just, there was a need for something. And I was just like, yeah, I'll do it. Like everything I've learned on the road, like, and now, you know, years and years later, I've been guitar teching. Like I never really knew that much about guitars. I was a bass player in a band. And when I took this guitar tech job, I told them like, I don't know a ton, like, but I'm willing to learn. And they're like, okay, we'll try out.
Right.
And now I've been on the same gig for 5 years, and everything I've learned about guitars has been on the road from other techs, from players, stuff like that. Like there's not a lot of schooling that goes into a lot of these roadie stories.
Totally. And I really appreciate the fact that I wore so many hats, you know, like everything I did a little bit. And in my position that I have today, where we run really complex and complicated productions, it's always nice to, you know, to kind of relate, like what are the merch guys' problems in a day? What are the tech's problems in a day? Of course, they're much better at what they're doing than I ever was, because they're the specialists, but it's kind of nice. And I really appreciate, you know, being able sometimes to anticipate their needs and stuff. Yeah. So I, you know, some of the tours were really shitty and really hard, of course, but I wouldn't miss a thing, because all of them kind of taught me a lesson or two towards, you know, the position I'm in now. So
I always used to joke with other guys when we talk about coming up and touring that, like, I feel like it should be an unofficial requirement that every single person that tours has to do at least a year in a shitty van before they can get onto a bus, so they can appreciate like a lot of that coming up and learning. And like, because, you know, being in a band and working for those smaller bands at first, it's like a lot of them, those nights just sleeping in the van, getting 3 hours of sleep every night, hauling your own gear. Like it's a lot more stressful than I think a lot of people think it is. But at the same time, like, I don't say that trying to get pity. Like, I loved every second of it. And so, man,
that's a good point. I think like that applies for crew, but I think it also applies to bands in a way. Yeah. Like the two bands that we currently mostly tour with, Heilung and Eluveitie, all their members have done this forever. Like they have started exactly in the same way with different bands, especially in Heilung's case. But, you know, they've been around. They've toured for years. They've toured in questionable conditions. And that's what's making them so like down to earth and grateful and easy to work with today. So you know, maybe, of course, we're not the artists, right? Like we get hired by the artist, of course. But, you know, if we talk, if that would be a nice qualification for roadies, I think it kind of applies to bands as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention the band because their singer is a psychopath and he'll probably come after me. But a reverse story of that, there was a band that I toured with when I was in a band. I never worked for them, but we were touring with them. That when they first came out, their first single was so huge that their first tour ever, their first shows they ever did, they were in multiple buses. And then later on during their career, when we were touring for them, they started going on a decline. And they had to scale down to a van, and they couldn't handle it. Like they literally could not handle it. And it was crazy to see them like go from, you know, being so used to bus touring and high productions to have to adjust to that lower level touring. Where on the flip side, if you start at that lower level touring, you have way more appreciation for getting to that bigger level. And that was an interesting thing to see when I first saw it. But, so,
for sure.
I know a lot of people are waiting for these questions, and I'm curious too. So the first time I saw Heilung, I was just blown away by just the sheer production of it. But I've got to know, just first question right off the bat, most of those bones are real that they're using, right?
Yes, and it makes my life a little bit more complicated.
Okay. I was going to ask about that too, but I don't know if you can answer this question. I would assume yes, because they're probably known for it. But like, there was a rumor I saw online that some of the bones they're using, or at least one of them, are actual human bones. Is that true?
I'm not gonna get into too much detail
Okay.
about all that,
Okay.
but so here's the thing: they're at least from different mammals, and touring internationally, we need carnets and stuff, of course, to cross borders. And I've had the situation a couple times where we would show up with a carnet and the list of um, what kind of bones and what kind of skins, like this is a goat skin or these are sheep bones, whatever. And it's raised a couple eyebrows, like, yeah, but what are they made of? Are they made of plastic? And I'm like, no, 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 they're made out of goat. So, it's yeah, it's always very interesting at the border.
I have to imagine that because I've been on tours where I've been a production assistant and I've never been a production manager on the scale you have or tour management, but I've had to deal with stuff like that and manifesting gear for border crossings. And like, there's pains in the ass just for certain guitars that are made out of certain kinds of wood. So like, I was going to ask, like, you've had to have had quite a few situations where you've been sitting there for a while, like with somebody at a border trying to explain to them what you're using it for. Like,
Right. Yeah. I mean, of course, we try to anticipate all these problems as much as we can. I actually have a little list somewhere where I like, have laid out in what countries we're allowed to bring what kind of like animal bones and stuff. And we work with great partners too. Like we cargo most of our stuff, so we don't fly it with us. So that makes everything a bit easier. But yeah, I mean, the carnet, it's not even kidding. Like it's huge. And if you go to a market like Russia, where Heilung is doing really well, then of course you need to translate it to Russian. And like, just as an anecdote, I think that was like one of the funniest experiences I had. Like when I sent the carnet to a Russian guy to translate it, and the questions he would ask me was just like so funny. It's like I said, the one like, yeah, but what is goat skin made of? And I was like, well, it's a skin of a goat, so it's made of goat. So that was really funny, but he was great and everything worked flawlessly. And yeah.
oh, that's wild, man. Like that production in and of itself, when I first saw it, was just like, since we have similar backgrounds, it's like my mind is going to all the gear that's on stage, all the microphones that are having to use, like, what's that sound check kind of like? Is that usually longer than a normal one, or do you have that dialed in pretty well? Like how many microphones are up there miking everything? Like it's got to be an insane amount.
I don't know that number by heart, but what I do know, this might sound cheesy, but it's true because just the crew that we have is so extremely wonderful. Like the size of production is really where we are at a comfortable level where everybody can focus on what they can do best. So we have our audio crew who have everything dialed in perfectly. We tour with our own consoles always. It's a Waves system something. I'm not an audio guy, so
Yeah, I'm not either.
we have yeah, we have a wonderful light engineer who knows exactly what he's doing. He's super quick, like adjusting, his show to the local requirements. We have wonderful stage crew that set everything up. We have a lot of man and woman power, of course, too, to set it up. Like all the warriors that you see on stage. There's just so many hands around. Everybody's so happy and excited about a project to help setting everything up. So it's actually a lot of work, yes, but it's dialed in so well by now that usually with like a 12 noon load in, we're not in a rush.
Yeah.
So, that's about, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's a lot of gear, but we're also a lot of people, so that makes everything easier.
No, that totally answers it because I've explained in some of the reaction videos I've done with production that on some of the bigger productions I've watched, I think a lot of people don't realize how much is actually involved. So not only does a band have their touring crew that goes with them, but they have to really trust that their touring crew knows what's going on, because then they're also going to have to direct the local crews that are helping out with everything. And like,
right.
it's just so impressive to me, man. Like even working in this industry that long, I still geek out over that kind of stuff. And it's so I usually save a lot of questions from YouTubers for the end, but we've actually been hitting them unintentionally. But One thing that I saw from somebody on YouTube was they said a lot of those shows that you guys do with them have indigenous people that come and get involved in the show and do that kind of stuff. Is that something that you guys have a local promoter kind of work out, or is that something that you would have to work out to get them involved?
That's actually happening on the artist side.
Oh,
So everything that is artistic direction, anything that's artistic choice, anything that happens on stage, what it is and the content of it, that's all 100% Heilung. So they have a very clear vision. They have a lot of, ideas and inspiration, and they just do that, and they will tell me ahead of time, hey, so for this show in LA, we'll have 4 additional people. These are the names. I will make their pass sheets. I will make sure, they have their accreditation in place, that they're accounted for as far as catering goes, and, and all the logistics. So that's just something that the artist kind of throws at me. So they're just like,
wow.
yeah, this show, we're going to be 4 people more. And they take care of it. They have such a wonderful network of people that they know. So basically, I'm just the guy who then makes it happen. But as far as who that is and how they know them, I don't know. And it's, they just throw it at me, and I'll take care of it.
That's super cool, because I've worked for artists that have done similar things. It's a band I worked for that they wanted a mariachi band for a performance, but they didn't like find the mariachi band and tell the tour manager. They just told the tour manager, find us a mariachi band. Like, so that's really impressive to me that they actually go out of the way to find those people and then just bring them in. That's really cool. But
And the communication is great from them as well. Like they will let me ahead of time. It's never like a last minute situation. I've had it once in my touring career when I worked for a band. I'm not going to say any names.
Yeah, we don't say names here.
Let's say I worked for an American band and they did a Euro festival run, and I showed up at the airport to pick them up. And then the guy had his daughter with him without me knowing. So there's like, oh yeah, by the way, here's my daughter. So can you accommodate her for all the hotels and stuff? Which of course I did. But it would have been a bit nicer not to have that surprise on the first day of the tour.
Yeah, that's another thing that, like, I'm not going to lie, it kind of drives me nuts when that happens on tour, especially for crew guys. I don't think if there's any artists that ever end up watching this, like last minute stuff like that, where they're like, oh, by the way, so-and-so just showed up and I need to get them on the guest list and get them a pass, and doors have already been opened for 20 minutes. And it's like, that's a lot more of a pain in the ass than I think a lot of people realize it is. And then in my world, when I'm guitar teching, a lot of these guests don't really have spatial awareness a lot of the times. So there's a lot of times in the middle of my shows where I will literally have to like wrangle people. I'll have to drop what I'm doing and start moving people and be like, hey, you guys need to go over here and you guys need to do this. And it's like, it's so funny that our jobs require just the smallest little, or like the smallest detail can throw everything off. Like just something as small as a person showing up last minute or something like that. Cause really the job that you do and that a lot of tour managers and production managers do is, like you said, like you really have to have that mindset to nerd out and get all the little specific details just dialed in. And when one of those details gets changed, it can throw everything off.
It can, and sometimes, of course, it's just the way it goes. They meet somebody last minute. Then, of course, we have the solver in our name of our company. So, of course, we're going to solve it. But it's true. And I'm going to make a little confession here. Like one of my favorite things to do sometimes is to throw people out of the backstage who have nothing to do there. So I'm not going to lie. Like sometimes it really is like, what are you doing here? You're in everybody's way. Please go out. And I'm like, okay.
I love that.
It's a little pet peeve, I'll say it.
Yeah. I've worked for bands where they want like whatever our guests want to do, you let them do it. But I've also worked for other bands that fully understand. They're like, when it's showtime, that's your world. They're like, even if it's our parents, if they're in your way, throw them out. Like it's,
Yeah. And with Heilung, sorry.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
And with Heilung, that's even more important because Heilung is so much more than just a show, right? Like it has so many spiritual levels as well, especially for all the people on stage. You have all the warriors with their actually really, really sharp weapons, that they carry on stage. And just because of all these factors with Heilung, it's very easy. Like nobody is allowed backstage who's not part of the show. Mm-hmm. And that makes my job really easy in that sense too.
Yeah,
But it's true that sometimes with other bands, that line isn't so clearly drawn.
yeah, there's a lot of bands that we've toured with that, like, if we were direct support, which anybody that's not familiar, that's the band that plays right before the headliner. Um, the second we're loaded off stage, they're putting up like bike rack and barricade, and they're like, nobody is allowed on this stage. Like nobody, not your guests, not like. And it's like I almost prefer the tours that do that because it allows us to work without actually having to worry about any outside interference whatsoever. Um, so as you mentioned, Eluveitie is another big band you work with. Correct me if I'm wrong. They have 9 band members, 8?
9 people on stage. Yes, correct.
Wow. So in my experience, I think the most I've worked with on a stage, band member wise, was like 6, maybe 7. And with a band like that, they have a lot of, unique instruments in terms of what you normally see in the metal community. Does that become a challenge for the crew on that in terms of also like sound checks and stuff like that? Like, is there more time needed for a band like Eluveitie to sound check than normal, or is it pretty much the same once you get the system down?
I think it's pretty much the same. And this is once again going to sound like a cliche, and we're both road crew, and of course we're going to say that, but it all stands and falls with the crew. So we have with Eluveitie, we have, again, if you have a band this size, then you just need adapt crew wise, right? So you might need an extra guy, stage left, stage right tech or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you can scale it to that. And I don't think we're slower. Like we've had shitty situations over the last couple of years where there was some delay or whatever, and we showed up half an hour before our, stage time at a festival, and we made it work. It can happen. Like the most work, of course, for it is for us, because with Heilung, with Eluveitie, where it's 9 people on stage and usually 6 crew, sometimes 7, and I think they fly out of 6 or 7 different airports. So that's a lot of logistics for us, of course, to do. With Heilung, it's even crazier. Like with the full Heilung setup, I think we're, depending on the show, depending on the market, we're between 16 and up to 25 people. And then also, of course, from 5, 6, 7, 8 different airports. But, it's just what I love doing. Like, I don't know, I'm maybe a little too nerdy about it, but like to have a challenge like that, and then like making sure everybody arrives on time at almost at the same time at the same airport, so we can save on the amount of shuttles that we use and stuff. Yeah. I can spend hours just doing that. So
it's funny because as you were saying that, we always joke, like as a crew, like sometimes the artists and the band members don't necessarily appreciate everything that the crew does, but at the same time, the crew doesn't necessarily always appreciate what the tour and production managers do. Like that's a lot of work, man. Like there have been a lot of fly dates we've done where it's like, we fly in, vans are ready when we get there, hotel rooms are ready when we get there. Like that's not by chance. That's because somebody like you has made sure that that's going to happen. So, on behalf of other crew guys everywhere, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just happy to be a commercial aviation and precision nerd. Maybe it's my Swiss genes.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, I've taken a good amount of your time, so I want to let you get going here. But man, this was so awesome to just sit and talk to another person with the crew background. Like in terms of, work and stuff, it's obvious to everybody we're in a weird situation right now with this pandemic and stuff. Like, what are you doing to keep busy? Are you still doing a lot of work related stuff, or have you picked up any hobbies on the side that you're enjoying with this downtime?
So the first benefit I have in that sense is that my partner works in the same industry. So she's also kind of out of a job for a while. So, we had super, super busy years for the last couple of years. So it was nice to just spend a lot of time together too. The situation is terrible for everybody, but, at least we were able to make the best out of it in that sense. And I've actually gone back to build on my academic background. So I started doing my master's degree a couple of weeks ago just to keep my mind busy and just kind of worst case scenario, and our whole industry just goes belly up, and there's never ever going to be another Heilung show, which I don't think will be the case. But you never know.
Mm-hmm.
As a tour manager and as a production manager, I prepare for all the different scenarios. So now I'm trying to invest in myself by doing my master's degree, and worst case, I can hopefully branch out in another industry if I have to. But I don't think that's going to happen. But at least until then, I keep my brain busy, and just take it by the day by day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to do it. I've tried to, one of the positives about this entire situation, like you had just mentioned, is, touring like this, we miss a lot of things in our lives. I've missed so many weddings, funerals, family events, whatever. Since this pandemic started, this is the longest time I've been able to spend consecutively with my wife at home. Like, since we've been married, since we've been together. And it's like, that is one huge positive out of all this. Like, at least we get to be at home, I was reading some stories about when this pandemic first happened and people were testing positive, like guys that got stranded in other cities and then had to quarantine there for a few weeks before they could fly home. And it's like, I guess the fortunate side is we got home, we're with our families and our loved ones and stuff like that. And, we're finding stuff to do.
And we love to spend and we love to spend time with our loved ones, right? I mean,
exactly.
There's probably also a couple other stories where that didn't play out so well. But in our case, it's absolutely fantastic. Like, I'm not going to lie, I miss being on tour. Like, I miss being able to do what I love most, because like literally that's the thing I love doing most. Like, touring with a band like Heilung all over the world, making beautiful shows happen with amazing people, that energy of every single show, being able to meet my friends that I have worldwide, especially on the West Coast in the US, it sucks. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I would much rather go back doing that yesterday than what I do now. But what choice do we have?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like you said, taking it day by day. We can't control anything that's going on, so we just got to make the best of it. But dude, this was a great talk. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's a little later. It's a little later over there than it is here. It's like middle of the day here right now. But maybe down the line, once this keeps going, I'll have you back on here again. Maybe once everything gets going again, we can talk about what you're doing. But seriously, man, thank you so much for your time. This was great. I hope everybody that's watching enjoyed this. So
pleasure was all mine, man. I really appreciate you doing this and giving the crew a voice in that sense as well.
Absolutely,
and, thanks
man.
for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much once again, man.